If you're a parent, you want what's best for your child. You want them to grow up to be strong, healthy, and happy. But how do you navigate the sensitive topic of body image, weight, and healthy habits with your kids while promoting a healthy relationship with food and your bodies? That is exactly what you're going to learn in today's episode. Today, we are joined by an awesome guest that I'm super excited about, Noha Pollack. She is a board-certified pediatrician who specializes in helping teens and preteens with body image and weight issues. She also helps professionals and parents who encounter children in this age group to use the right words to communicate positive messages about health instead of focusing on weight. We have such an important conversation today in which you're going to learn where to start if you feel concerned about your child's weight, eating habits, or body image, and how to have that conversation without triggering them and without talking about weight issues per se. Why your language around body, weight, and food is so important, and how to use the right words to have productive conversations. What nutrition habits to develop for your family to ensure a positive relationship with food while promoting healthy behaviors, and so much more. So without further ado, let's jump into today's interview. So I know that you work with preteens and teens, but I'm sure that you also encounter a lot of parents who might be worried about their daughters, their sons who are possibly developing a negative body image, negative self-esteem, or some kind of disordered eating. What would you say is the biggest things that these parents can focus on? Where can they get started if they start noticing and start feeling concerned that their daughters, their son are exhibiting body image issues?
Excellent. So I love that question. Thank you for asking it. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because in my practice, I saw so many tears, Sabrina, and they would cry and cry. The patient question about the child's health or their body size, and then there would be tears and tears, and that could go on for minutes.
Noha,
so that's why I want to talk about this today.
I'm just going to pause you right here because my internet is unstable. So I'm going to go ahead and just change the network. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just didn't want your words to get muffled. So I'm going to go ahead and change the network.
Okay, yeah, I have mine with a wired set, so mine should be good.
Yeah, it's for me it tends to alternate between two, and sometimes it tends to fall off on the. Okay, now we're back to the right one. So, do you want to just get right back started to where you started your answer?
Okay. So I love that question. Thank you for asking it. The reason I started talking about this topic at all is because I've noticed in my practice that a parent would come in with a child who's suffering with weight issues. And the minute that the parent uses the word weight, the child would cry. And sometimes the crying can go on for a long time and then they shut down and there's nothing else we can do to bring them back to the conversation. So first of all, parents, if you do see your children suffering in terms of how they feel about their body or health, if they look in the mirror and they're upset, if they hate going clothes shopping, if they refuse to take off their shirt at the swimming pool, please know that something is going on with them emotionally and handle it with great care. I learned a really hard lesson in my practice again, where a teenage male actually came in for his checkup and I went about to tell him about his weight. And he stopped me in mid-sentence and said, "Excuse me, I didn't give you permission to talk to me about that." And I appreciated him a month later. Right away, I was a little hurt, but I moved on. So I learned my lesson. So parents, don't forget, ask permission before you talk about a sensitive topic. Sometimes it's just not the right moment for your child to talk about it. So what do you do if you notice this? You come up to them and you say, "You seem unhappy today. What's on your mind?" If they don't want to talk about it, then you let it go. You let it go for a while, and then you do it again and again until eventually they're going to open up and tell you. Don't start by saying something like, "Oh, are you unhappy with how you look? What's wrong? Did you gain a lot of weight? How can I help you with that?" Because that's not really what they want to hear. They just want permission. They want to be asked permission. Can we talk about this today? And then once they open up to you, that's when the conversation should really focus on health rather than their weight.
Okay. So I think that's one thing that a lot of people struggle with is understanding that a smaller body doesn't necessarily mean a healthier body. And a lot of people confuse weight and health, and they think, well, if someone's gaining weight, then it necessarily means that they're becoming more unhealthy. And so how would a parent kind of toe that line that's difficult of, okay, maybe I see that they're gaining weight, but it doesn't, how do I actually process the fact that it might not necessarily mean that they're becoming unhealthier? Because especially in preteens and teens, our bodies are changing. And I'm sure that you're familiar with the step point weight theory, where your body is just eventually going to naturally settle at this as this weight. And it might not be the weight that you were at when you were 12 or 14. And it might not be the weight that you necessarily want to be at, but it's the weight that your body feels the most comfortable, that you're able to maintain in a way that is sustainable. And that doesn't allow you to sacrifice your life in that process. So how do we toe that line?
Absolutely. I love that point, because wellness is not fitness and fitness is not wellness, right? And so you can actually, as a parent, talk to your child about whether they feel healthy rather than how they look. So if you see your child running and they can run as fast as far as everyone else, your child is healthy. Okay. If you see them struggling going up the hill, but everyone else can go just fine, that's when you discuss the word health with them. How do you feel when you're running? Oh, you feel this way. Let's see. Do you want to make it a little different, or are you happy with how it is? If they're happy with how they feel when they're active, then you leave them alone. If they choose to make a difference, that's when you, as a provider or as a parent, step in and give the advice if they ask for it.
Okay, I love that. And what would be, let's say they're not happy, they don't feel healthy. As a parent, and a lot of the people who are listening might not even know what kind of advice to give because they're looking for advice for themselves. So what do you do in that situation?
So I'm hoping that you have a good healthcare provider that can help guide you and your child through the situation. And there's many really good communities out there. Just beware of the diet culture communities where you're going to see things, especially on social media, that are going to promise things that are pretty unrealistic. Lose this much weight, or look this good, or drop this many dress sizes or pant sizes. So be careful of that. I would say, parent, consider going to your healthcare provider first. And if your child is very sensitive about this topic, you should let your healthcare provider know ahead of time. Call them up and say, my child doesn't really like the word weight. Can you please be careful in how you address my child so that there's no damage done at that visit? And then once you're at the healthcare provider's office, you can ask for advice regarding that. However, there are general guidelines that we can talk about today, and I'd love to do that.
Absolutely. Go ahead. And I would love to hear some of those general guidelines. And I'm saying this because I absolutely agree that if you're able to find the right healthcare provider, you have the golden ticket. But as someone who's in the medical field, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of weight stigma and a lot of fat phobia when it comes to the medical care system. And a lot of women for themselves are scared to go to the doctor because if they're having struggles with their weight or with eating, the first thing that their doctor is going to say is, well, just lose weight, as if that's, the magic ticket to being healthy, when they don't really focus on what's your mindset around food, what's your history with dieting, what are your daily habits. They don't actually focus on those things that we have control over. So what are some general guidelines? And I'm sure that this could be helpful, not for just talking to your kids, but for yourself if you feel a little bit of resistance with your current healthcare provider who might have a little bit of that fat phobia.
Absolutely. So before I answer that wonderful question, I want to say that your mindset as a parent is super important. If you don't see people who struggle with weight as being weak or less than, or having poor body control or self-control, then you will not bring that to your child either. So let's all, as a community, understand that people struggle and we all have different struggles. Some of us struggle with weight and others don't, but that doesn't make us weak or less than anyone else. Number one, the general guidelines I'd love parents to know is 3 important things. It's really nutritious food, movement, and sleep. Those are the three things you should focus on if your child is struggling. Nutritious food. Start in the supermarket or the store and look in your cart. Is it about 80% or so healthy, nutritious food and about 20% or less food for pleasure? If that's the case, you're in the right track. If you see that your cart is full of food for pleasure and not enough nutritious food, change that ratio. No one is saying children should never have snacks or should never have a piece of candy or cake. That's unrealistic and pretty unfair, to be honest. But if you follow the 80-20 rule, where at least 80% of the food you're offering your child is for nourishment, not for pleasure, then things should go in the right direction. Number 2, movement. If your kid hates exercising, don't make them exercise. Just make them move, okay? They can dance, they can hula hoop, they can walk, they can ride their bike. Whatever it is, movement is important in this health journey. And then thirdly, sleep. If your kid is not getting the right number of hours per night, they will not make good food choices, no matter what their age is. So anyone who is sleep deprived will most likely crave more sugars and more snack type foods than healthy foods. So those are the 3 pillars of a healthy lifestyle, in my opinion.
Okay, I love that. So I have a few follow-up questions. So I'm going to start with sleep because that's the question that's on the top of my mind. Kids don't like being told what to do. People don't like being told what to do. And I've studied behavioral science and I know that it has to come from within. It has to feel like it's your decision. And so as a parent who wants to have their kids focus on their sleep routine a little bit more, they might be going to bed at 1, 2 a.m. You can't really set a curfew for them because that's going to take away their autonomy. So how would you go about having that conversation with your child to get them to maybe prioritize their sleep a little bit more?
Oh, wow. That's a deep question. You're right? Especially teenagers. If you tell them what to do, they're going to do the opposite.
Exactly.
I totally agree with you. So number 1, help your child focus on how they feel the mornings when they sleep well. Say, wow, how do you feel today? If they say, I feel great, I've had a great day, etc., just point that out. That's wonderful. I'm so glad you slept well. And then please understand who takes ownership of the phone, especially if it's a preteen. Between 12 and 15, most kids are not paying for their own phone. And having the phone in bed with them is pretty detrimental to their sleep. So while you can't tell them when to go to sleep, if you as a parent pay for the phone bill, it's your phone. Mm-hmm. That phone should not be in the bedroom at night. Nothing great happens at midnight on the phone in a preteen or teen's hands. Mm-hmm. So if you own the phone, please consider taking it and putting it in a room where the child does not get to look at it. So devices are a big deal. If you can get the devices away, and then you leave your child to their own freedoms. If they want to read for a while or whatever, eventually they're going to go to sleep. So that would be my piece of advice. You're right. You can't force the issue, but you can point them in the right direction and you can take control of the things that are distracting, such as devices.
Yeah, I think that the phone issue is huge because most of the time we're just there scrolling in our bed. When you don't have that, most kids at this point, they're not going to have much to do. So I think that's really important. My other question in terms of nutritious foods, I love that you mentioned make sure that you have enjoyable foods in the house. And that is something that I always hammer home with my clients is, when you try to keep junk food out of the house, it's actually counterproductive. And so what do you think happens in families? I've definitely experienced this myself and I've had friends experience this, but I want to know from your point of view, what happens in families that, let's say, a mother is very concerned about her child's eating habits and she thinks, well, if I just don't keep enjoyable foods in the house, then she or he won't be able to eat them. Why is that harmful? And how can that result in maybe even more weight and food issues?
So, anything that's forbidden, we want, right? So we don't want to make anything really truly forbidden. And we also know that our children are going to go to parties, to sports events, and they're going to go to friends' houses and they're going to get whatever's there and probably gorge on it if they never eat it at home. So that's why there needs to be a balance, but it cannot be a 50-50 balance. It cannot be 50%, nutritious food and the other 50% less nutritious. It really should be around 80-85% nutritious food, and the rest should be less nutritious food. So absolutely have something in the house that your child will enjoy, even if it's not so nutritious, but not in large amounts. Right?
Yeah.
So everything in moderation, I feel, is the solution. But honestly, the answer to your question is anything forbidden, they're going to want. And then there's that scarcity, mindset that if I never see it and then I suddenly see it, I'm going to eat it all instead of eating a small piece. And that scarcity mindset can really lead to weight gain. I totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when we do finally are in contact with those foods, like you said, you go to a friend's house and you see that they have chips and you never have chips at your house, you end up overeating. And the more you overeat, the more you lose the ability to listen to your body. And then you kind of go through this period of feeling very restricted and then overeating. And that's like the perfect leadway to yo-yo dieting and weight cycling. And the earlier that this starts, the harder it is to break later on in your life.
I totally agree with that. Yep.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit. Let me see. I had a question that I want to make sure that I don't forget. So before we were talking about when our kids are struggling with perhaps their eating habits are not as healthy as we would like them to be, especially when we're going through our teenage years. Our eating habits, we have a little bit more independence. We are going out a little bit more. And so as a parent, it can be very easy to want to try to take control because we want what is best for our kids. But I'm sure that you've probably heard the studies or read about the studies that kids who are the most controlled and the most restrained by their parents are the ones who are going to have the most weight issues and food issues. And that when we let go of that control and we kind of let them make their own choices, then they're going to tend to have a little bit more variety of their food. They're going to learn to listen to your bodies again. How would you advise a parent who is having that hard time with, I really want what's best for my kids. I want them to become healthier. I want them to have healthier habits, but I also don't want to be a helicopter parent. I don't want to control what they're eating because I know that's going to be counterproductive.
I totally agree. And I love talking to parents about not being the food police. They can't be the food police because they can't be there all the time. I totally agree with your point. So I would advise them the following. No matter what happens, you cannot control everything that your child does for the rest of their lives. Give them the autonomy to make some decisions, and they will make some wrong decisions. They're supposed to make wrong decisions. We all are. And then hopefully learn from their wrong decisions. If they eat an entire cake instead of one slice, they're going to feel so sick. They're going to learn their lesson. But if you never let them make that mistake, that lesson will not be learned. Yeah. So I would strongly recommend that parents do not become the food police. Their job as parents are providers. So you provide what's, in your opinion, is a good balance of nutritious and less nutritious foods. You give your child the opportunity to eat both, and then you allow them to make some choices. But being totally in control is going to have your child rebel against that control at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And from what I'm hearing, and I know that this is something that I focus on as well, is focus more on having conversations around how it feels to eat certain foods, how their bodies respond, how their energy responds, instead of assigning morality to this is a good food, this is a bad food, but more so, okay, so I'm noticing that you haven't eaten a single vegetable today, or that you've only been eating candy. We're around Halloween season, so it's a good time. How has that been feeling for you? How's your energy been? Would you agree?
Exactly. How's your tummy feeling today? Were you able to concentrate today during your exam or something like that? You're totally correct to focus on how your body feels rather than what you did. And do not say good food or bad food. For me, that's a big taboo, to be honest with you. There's nutritious food and less nutritious food. But if you call it bad, then you feel bad about eating it. And I have no intention of feeling bad about ice cream.
Absolutely. I love that you say, more enjoyable foods. I call them fun foods. They're all important, and some are going to nourish our bodies and some are going to nourish our soul, but we need to be able to have those and to not feel guilty when we have the chocolate or the ice cream, and just enjoy every bite of it.
Exactly.
So I would love to know what is some of the advice that you give to your patients or your clients who come in, who might be struggling with feeling bullied when it comes to their weight. People, more and more, diet culture is louder and louder, and around that age is when kids are not the nicest and they don't really have a filter. And so I'm sure that you probably do see a lot of your patients come in and they're having some negative messages or comments being made about their weight. How do you handle that?
So first of all, I love that you asked that question. I had a great conversation with a family just yesterday, actually. Two sisters, different sizes. One of them was watching the other one change, and she said something. And when I was knocking on the door, the other one was saying, "Don't you dare body shame me." And I love that. So kids are speaking up for themselves. And I'm really proud of her, actually, for saying that, because the bottom line is that people's opinions are not facts. And we're going to tell that to our children. I'm going to tell that to my patients until the day I go. But an opinion is simply an opinion. And if you have a hurtful opinion, it's probably coming from a place of hurt. So just understand that, number one. Number two, as parents, if you do see or hear, whether it's a well-meaning relative or friend saying, "Oh, look at her, she gained a bunch of weight. What happened? How did you explode so much?" Which I've actually heard in person. It would be wonderful for the parent to stand up to that person and say, "This is an inappropriate comment. My child is healthy and wonderful, and I love them the way they are." So just you as a parent really should set the limits if you witness such, negative messages or bullying. At school, however, it's hard to deal with. And that's when your conversation with your child is even more important. So let them know that someone's opinion is not that important. They're coming from a place of hurt, not a place of love. And that you as a person, if you love your body and you're healthy, it doesn't matter what other people think or say. And the second thing I'd love to say to that is, as a parent, if you're walking down the street and you see a person who's larger than you expect, and if you make a negative comment about it, your child will internalize that immediately as judgment. So the less judgmental you are of others, the better it is for your child's self-esteem.
I absolutely love that you bring that up, because this is something that I also do as I'm working on body image with my clients. One thing I really have to help them clue in on is I want you to acknowledge and be aware of the thoughts, not just the language, but the thoughts that you have about people around you who may be living in a larger body. Because if you are not able to look at those people with compassion and not go to the automatic judgment of that person might be lazy or unmotivated or have lack of willpower, if you still have fat phobia towards other people, you're never going to be able to accept your own body.
And your child will also internalize that. I totally love that message.
100%. Is there anything that you see in the moms who come in, any of the common threads, common concerns that you see that you think is important to talk about today?
Yeah, I think the biggest concern is that they're afraid of their child having a severe illness because of their weight. So we need to just decrease the anxiety a little bit, because the bottom line is if your child can focus on health, then they will not get diabetes. If they're moving, they're not going to get diabetes. So keep it up that you focus on their health, nutritious food, sleep, and movement, and hopefully you will avoid as many diseases as possible. So I do see a lot of fear in parents' eyes regarding, Junior getting diabetes like Uncle Joe, or you know what I mean? And they use those fear tactics even in front of me at times. And I sometimes have to stop them and say, no, fear is not going to help your child eat better.
Yeah.
It's only going to make them more stressed out and more likely to binge. So please calm down and let's talk about the likelihood of that happening. It is possible, but that doesn't mean that you should, shame or have your child be scared of it. And let's talk about health. Let's talk. So what happens if your child goes for a 15-minute walk a day instead of, sitting and playing video games? Will that help them avoid that disease? Most likely. So let's do that.
Yes. And I'm sure that you see this often, especially with all the fear mongering going on online and pretty much everywhere about sugar. What if, especially during that age group, you're eating a little bit more sugar than you would as an adult? And there's probably a lot of that fear of, well, I've heard that sugar is toxic and it's addictive. Like, how can I possibly feed that to my child? Is that something you've heard before?
So much fear. And I don't advocate for eating a lot of sugar. And I don't advocate for keeping soda or juice all over the place. However, if your child is craving something sweet, it's okay to give it to them. That doesn't mean they should have it 3 meals a day. Mm-hmm. I don't advocate for having sugar cereals in the morning, just to be fair about that. However, honestly, 80-20 rule should do a lot of good for a lot of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is I'm the same. I believe in science and I absolutely know if you only eat sugar all day long, well, first of all, you're not going to feel really good. And that's what I always explain to my clients when I'm teaching them about intuitive eating is when you actually allow yourself to eat all foods without guilt or shame, you're probably not going to be able to keep up eating sugar all day long because it's that fear of, well, if I allow myself to eat these foods, then that's all I'm going to eat because we're not used to listening to our bodies and to acknowledging how different foods make us feel. And the more that you try to avoid these foods, you're actually more likely to overeat. And the poison is in the dose. And so, of course, if all you eat is sugar because you're binging on it, then you're not going to feel great and it's going to affect your health. But when you actually give yourself permission to eat, and like you said, coming back to urgency and scarcity that we were talking about before, when you don't think, well, I have to eat as much as I can now because I'm not going to be able to eat it again, then you're able to pay attention to, okay, maybe I just need 1 or 2 squares of chocolate instead of 3 chocolate bars.
Exactly. Perfectly said.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say to kind of wrap things up today, we talked about how to talk about language and how to communicate more in terms of health promoting behaviors, sleep, movement, and nutrition. Instead of focusing on weight, we talked about how to handle bullying and how to stand up for your kids and also how to have them stand up for themselves. What would you say is, if you had to kind of wrap things up into one final message for moms or any kind of parents who maybe are worried about their kids, about their weight, about their eating habits?
I would say that don't fret. Number one, scales don't measure willpower. Many successful people in the world struggle with weight. And if you as a parent just work on the child's mindset, that they will be successful in their health journey, which is what I'm going to call it from now on. I'm not going to call it a weight loss struggle or a health or a weight journey, but a health journey. That's really what we should focus on. Let's focus on how well your child feels and how much they can move freely without pain.
Right. So feels, not looks, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm very curious, before we go, did you ever were you ever kind of sucked into diet culture, into weight stigma, before you did this move into progressive pediatrics?
So first of all, I've been sucked into it the majority of my life. I would say it's only the last few years that I really kind of looked around and said, oh my goodness, what's happening here? So yes, I've evolved myself. Of course, I have gone on many diets in my life to try to lose weight. Mm-hmm. I've done keto. I've done all of the ones you can probably think of to try to lose weight. And now I'm happy with my body. Is it perfect? It's perfect for me. That's the answer.
I absolutely love that. Well, thank you so much. And I ask this to every guest. So if you had to say something to that person who you were years ago before you learned all of this and before you change your perspective, what would you say to that younger version of you?
I would say that the minute you start loving your body, everybody around you will accept you as you are. So please do so.
I absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Noha, for being here, for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom. And I know how helpful this is going to be for moms who are feeling some of that fear and that anxiety about their kids, and helping them grow up with a more positive body image. I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And my last message is I really want to amplify this message. So if anyone needs a speaker, I would love to be a speaker on this topic of parenting a child who struggles with weight and body image. So please contact me using any social media that you can find me on, including LinkedIn. And I'd love to speak on this topic.
Yes. So that's the next question I wanted to ask is where can people find you? I know that you, like you mentioned, you have Instagram, you have social media. So where can they find you? What is your website?
So it's progressivepediatrics.com, but I'm currently working on my speaker website. So therefore on LinkedIn is the easiest way to find me. It's just my name, Noha Pollack. And I would love some messages about speaking.
Okay, wonderful. So I will put all of that in the show notes for people to contact you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have an amazing day, and I will see you guys on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magna Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.